Half a day and good afternoon. The time is now 1:16 p.m. The roundtable discussion on the Customs and Quarantine Agency, also with the committee chair of the Guam Airport Authority, is now starting. I'd like to thank Senator Uggan for being present today, Vice Speaker Talahi, Senator Ada, and Senator Munya. Thank you for today. And so, Chief and Director, we come to this table because the legislature is trying to be a little bit more proactive in addressing some of the challenges that Guam Customs and Quarantines face today. We want to discuss a little bit about the shortage of manpower you have. There's a great concern, as far as in my committee, about the importation of drugs and what is being done within the Customs and Quarantine to intercept that before it comes into our island. Also, we want to talk about the anticipation, perhaps, that the Customs and Quarantine is looking into for increasing passenger fees. And so the passenger fee has not been increased since 2013, I believe. And so this is something that we want to be proactive as a legislative body to provide the public with this kind of transparency. Just to note for the public that Customs and Quarantine does not receive any money from the general fund. And so this money that is contributed to your agency comes from your passenger fee. And so I believe there is a presentation in place, but perhaps, Director, you can share with us before we get it started a little bit about the current status of your operations, the shortage of manpower that you have, and some of the challenges you face that you feel that in increasing the passenger fees will help the Customs and Quarantine Agency to better protect our island and community from the importation of drugs, regulatory impacts with agriculture and other products being in that perhaps because of shortage of manpower are being unaccounted for. Director.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for accepting us, to come here in this round table, to discuss challenges in customs and how we can better protect our island. Senator Ogden, thank you. Senator Terlahi, Senator Munya, Senator Ada. Yes, it's been some time, before our fees has been increased. So that's the very reason why I think this is a great investment for Guam, because as you see, there's a lot of challenges out there that we face. Every time you look at the news, somebody gets arrested for drugs or something. Someone is caught bringing in drugs through the airport, the post office, at the port, or there's domestic violence out there. So what we did, Senator, is we got together with all our stakeholders, and I want to thank our management people here in Customs. We put all our minds together and with the administration, and right now as we're talking, we're going to hire about 29 officers. They've been tested already, and right now they're going through the physical tests, next week. Then after that, the selection process and interviewing will be conducted. But what I wanted to mention is that there's a need to increase the fees, down at the port, the air cargo, and the passenger fee. And the reason for that is because we need to get more high-tech. We need to be more tech-savvy. We need to go up an extra notch so that we'll know how these culprits, as you see, sometimes in the district court, it shows how these guys smuggle drugs into Guam, putting it in sea containers, putting them in Home Depot buckets, taking the time to take out all that salt that they use for, the pools or the chlorine tablets, and they replace them with meth. And our guys down there, at the port are faced with, those challenges because we have thousands of containers that go through that port. And I wanted to thank Joanne Brown and the U.S. Coast Guard, working with us to get the mobile X-ray device that we now possess, that we can deploy to the port, the container freight station, the air cargo, to try to detect these contrabands. And right now we're leaning forward with the port security grant the Coast Guard and working with the Port Authority to try to see if we can obtain the advanced container X-ray system that they have in the U.S. mainland. It can be installed at the checkpoint down at the Port Authority, where the tractor trailer can just pick up the container, drive through that checkpoint, stop for a few minutes. Someone will be in that room, will have access to computer X-ray system, and be able to detect all types of contraband. So we're looking forward for that, Senator, and let me leave you with that right now.
Thank you very much, Director. Forgive me, I did not acknowledge everyone at the table. Chief Perez, thank you for being here. Colonel, thank you. Colonel Farring, thank you very much. And Colonel Tyron, very much, thank you for being here. I believe there is a presentation. Are we ready to upload this presentation now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. Okay, can we bring up the presentation, please? And
Colonel Tyron is going to do the narration.
okay, thank you. Okay, Colonel.
Yes, good afternoon, Senators. I am Colonel Philip Tyron, Jr. I'm with the Customs and Quarantine Agency. And so we want to thank the Senators for allowing us to be here today. I'm going to have to, I didn't prepare slides for myself, so I'll just have to read off of going off the screen. So this is fresh, hot off the press, so, so if we, next slide, please. And so I just put the slide together in the same fashion that your office has sent out the presentation. And so we'll talk about the personnel and then the operations of the different areas. We'll talk about operations at the airport, the cargo operations, maritime operations, and then I'll speak a little bit about the operations at Andersen Air Force Base and also the post office. And then we'll get into the service charge. Slide, please. The last time we changed our rate was in 2013. The economic impact statement that was prepared at that time indicated that in 1998, the level of customs personnel employed by the agency was 232. Slide. What you see here, and you might have to straighten a bit, is the depiction of 1998 in comparison to follow-on years. The years that you'd be looking at are 2007, 2010, 2011, and leading up to 2018. And if you look at the numbers that are represented in the chart, we've never been able to attain that ideal number of 232. And the numbers actually change based on some of the increased mandates that are placed on the agency through the years, and you'll see me, it'll be in the slides as well. Next slide, please. One of the key things that we discuss amongst ourselves at the agency is the performance indicators that take us to how well we're performing as an agency. And Customs and Quarantine Agency is responsible for the accountability of all people and cargo that comes through the ports of entry. Anything coming across the border, we have the responsibility to be accountable for through inventory and then also through examination and inspection. The balance is quite delicate. It's important for us to use all the skills and equipment that we have available to us to balance the throughput at the air cargo and maritime cargo operations, along with the throughput at the airport with our close to 1.4 million passengers that come through on average. When you look at this slide, you can see a dramatic decrease in the number of seizures. That number is actually 322 drug seizures at the time of 1998. In 1998 was also the time that we had 232 officers. And if you look at the decline, it's a quite drastic drop as we lead into the 2000 period. You see an outlier there, that anomaly of Yeah, in 2012. Now, that anomaly exists from our post office operations. We had some smugglers who attempted to become resourceful and attempt to defeat us by smuggling, breaking down larger packages of methamphetamine and putting it into envelopes. And so the 372 seizures that you see there are actually representative of hundreds of envelopes of methamphetamine that were attempted to be smuggled. By the Postal Service and working alongside, our customs officers working alongside the U.S. Postal Inspection Service, the postal inspectors, and then also our K-9 and our task force officers who are assigned to that section. Slide, please. The areas that are highlighted are highlighted for the purpose of, again, decline in seizures. Now, the areas that are listed here are the primary or the predominantly seized areas where we have predominant seizures. And so when you look at the numbers, again, right, the picture is supposed to paint the picture that there's a decline in our capability because of the lack of manpower. Slide, please. What I wanted to emphasize is that over the years, we have had a continuing decline in personnel numbers, but a huge uptick in requirements and homeland security requirements, along with our absorption of the plant protection and quarantine personnel and the duties and responsibilities. And so the continuing decline of personnel does not help us in that sense, from that perspective. Yes, at the time of our picking up the plant protection and quarantine personnel, we acquired approximately 17 officers as the plant protection and quarantine that we managed to convert to full-fledged customs officers. And at the same time, what we did was capitalize on the experience and training that they had and converted, well, not converted, but enhanced the training tool bag for all of the customs officers at that time. I think we had about 150 officers, and so we used our PPQ experts that we absorbed into the agency to train 150 officers to become capable of performing PPQ duties. Slide, please. Gosh, I wish there were a better. Yes, and so, Senator, did you get a copy of our documents for the, okay, this one. Okay. Okay, so I will use this then to speak to the slide. The areas that you see that are not shaded are our actual the personnel numbers that we are seeking to increase in 2018. Now, understanding how the budget works and then even the manner that we are able to change the service charge, we realize that our projections are ambitious and that it's potential that if we are really going to hire the 97 officers and 4 civilian vacancies that we are going to need to improve our capacity, it might take us actually 2 years. It takes about a year to run 50 recruits through the cycle, the customs training cycle, using our GCC counterparts, and then bringing them back to customs to run the customs technical training side of the house. So the numbers actually are able to show what our projections are for 2018 and 2020. When you look at 2018, we are still approaching our operations from the current makeup and structure of the agency. As we move into 2020, our intention is to present ourselves as a more self-sustaining agency and potentially move in the direction of either semi-autonomous or fully autonomous. And at that point, some of the positions that we've identified are professional positions. Some of those positions are in the areas of management information system, finance, accounting, and then also we're looking at some professionals in the biosecurity division, the plant pathologist, plant botanist, and entomologist. And so when we arrive at 2020, we are looking at a total of 324 officers, 324 total customs personnel. And I'm sorry, I take that back. A total of 347 customs officers. It's actually in the green there. And the breakdown would be 182 officers and 32 civilians. That number would represent what we feel is the ideal staffing that would allow us to perform our job better. Next slide. Again, I apologize for the slide being as small as it is. But what this here is a discussion on our airport personnel. There are approximately 1.4 million passengers on average that come through the airport. And we actually have that in the schedule that was presented to you, Senator Nelson. And the average that we come up with is 1.4, ranging from 2017 or from 2011 up to 2017. And based on that average, we have time in motion, or historically, right? We perform time in motion studies, which tell us the number of passengers that a customs officer would perform during a routine interview as passengers are coming through, and that number is 2 minutes. So an officer would use all of his skills, all of the intelligence that is available to him at the time, to speak to a passenger, verify their identification, verify the items that they're carrying with them, who is traveling along with them, and then reconcile what they declare to be their actual identity versus an identity that they're versus an identification card or passport that they would have with them at the time of entry. And what we've come to find out is that it takes 6 officers at our primary counter and 4 officers at our secondary counters to move a total of 3,000 passengers or 2,500 passengers during an 8-hour shift. And so we use the high number, which is 6 and 4, and we have a program or a system for passenger processing. It's called the Customs Accelerated Passenger Inspection System. And in that system, there are specific positions that are assigned. And I've used the actual historical or the original version of the CAPI system so that I could display to you the ideal staffing of all the positions so that we can perform that function at the airport properly. So you'll have 10 officers that will be assigned on the line, and then different officers throughout the airport. You'll have 2 officers who receive the aircraft and verify the general declaration against the number of passengers that actually come off the aircraft. And those officers monitor the activity of the passengers as they deplane until they get down to the customs inspection area. Once they get down there, we'll have the different positions that are listed on the as indicated on the slideshow. And that magic number for us is 26. At 26 officers and having to allocate 7 days off for each person and just doing it, apportioning it evenly throughout the week, we'd end up with a staff of type situations. With that number, we have all the positions in our passenger inspection system staffed. You can stop me, I talk kind of quick. I've been doing this for 30 years now. At least in September, it'll be 30 years. So
I think that if it's okay, we'd like to finish your presentation. Unless, Senator, you have any questions? Okay.
Okay.
Yes, we want to go through the presentation first,
sure.
and we'll ask you at the end, perhaps.
All right. Slide, please. And so one of the increases in personnel that we're looking at is in this area right here. I'm sorry. What you're seeing here is how we're normally staffed at the airport, which is just our 3 shifts. And that's just to facilitate the passengers coming through. But lately we've been seeing a lot of media coverage on the effectiveness of the Mandania Task Force. Now, I applaud our brothers in arms and our fellow law enforcement officers who are with the Mandania Task Force. But what their success indicates to us is that there are gaps at the border. Our border happens to be quite porous because of the lack of personnel. Next slide, please. And so I omitted the slide, man, as I was putting this together. So like I said, it's hot off the press, but there's a slide in there that's missing, and it's titled Gap Management. But we have a tarmac team, a sterile area team, and also a cargo inventory and exit points staffing that we have introduced for airport operations, and that we feel will start to close those gaps. The same personnel that will be used to perform those functions can easily be taken and placed down at the air cargo location and also down at the maritime section. And so with that increase of personnel, we can close those gaps. That's our intent. And so the next slide here indicates what our cost projections are and also what our personnel numbers are going to look like with our air cargo operations. So the numbers are present there. I won't go into the detail with it, but if you have questions, I can break it down. If you're looking at the total number of air terminal cargo tons, we're looking at 48 million tons of cargo that comes through there, and our current staffing, we're seeking to plus that area up by whatever's in the blue. That looks approximately to be 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, at least 10 personnel. And so that is part of the increase in personnel that we're looking to implement, and that's where we're going to be putting them, at least for our air cargo operations. Next slide, please. Next slide. Thank you. So this represents the maritime cargo tons, and this total revenue tons is an actual report that was prepared by the Port Authority of Guam, and theirs represents 4.2 billion tons of cargo that comes through. If you'll notice, we're pretty much looking to double up our staff down at the commercial port to be able to perform a better function down there and increase our capacity. Next slide, please. Double is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm sorry. At the that number 8 was for the air cargo operations, and then down at our maritime section, that number would be 10. So we currently have 9 assigned, and we're looking to double up and make it 19. Next slide, please. What you see here is the representation of the budget that we are proposing for 2018, and as I stated earlier, the realistic implementation of this would more than likely be next year, once we have shown a successful ability to collect the funds. But we're looking at improving or increasing our budget. We're almost doubling our budget. And I think that the easy justification, if you're just looking at simple math, would be that if we are at already less than half of what the number was that we were in 1998, then it just makes mathematical sense that if we doubled our number, then our budget would almost double as well. Simple math, Mr. Speaker. Oh yes, but yes. We have the breakdown for yes. All of these figures have been analyzed, and the justification is inclusive, and so we're prepared to speak about those for each initiative that's listed on the budget. Our intent is to execute a promotion initiative, and the figure for that is included there. We are seeking to, we have not had promotions, we've had recent promotions, but we have not promoted customs officers for quite some time. You could have customs officers who have been in the service of the government of Guam for over 15 years and have not received a promotion. And so when we look at what the performance is, we have to move into areas of trying to figure out, is it just the fact that we have less officers to do the job, or is it also that our officers are not so motivated to do the job? Especially when we start talking about what motivates them to perform that function much better. And we think that promotions can contribute to that. The other initiatives that we're looking at is a vehicle modernization initiative. If you could, next slide, please. Kind of went ahead of myself there. Slide again, please. All right. Go ahead and back me up. 2 more. What we're seeing here, right, is the total budget. I will break down the initiatives. The initiatives will be broken down further in the slideshow, but what I'm representing here now is the breakdown of the figures. So our full implementation is $34.9 million is what we're looking at. Next slide, please. That figure at the top there represents 75% of our operations. What we found historically is that our customs operations are divided into 2 major areas. 75% of our costs originate from airport operations, and 25% of our costs are derived from air cargo and maritime operations. And so the figure that you see there represents 75% of that $34.9 million budget, and that is taken up, the cost recovery is taken up by airport operations. Next slide, please. That figure represents 25%, like I explained earlier. Slide, please. The figure that you see there is the cost that is represented by 1.4 million passengers multiplied times our current rate of 8.29. That's the current passenger service charge. Next slide, please. And what you're seeing in this diagram is the change, is the amount that we're short. Based on our initial projected figure, which came in the previous slide, for our total airport operations, if we were to execute operations given our projection of personnel that we are anticipating to hire, we would be short $14 million. To arrive at that figure, next slide, please. We are looking at, we are proposing an increase of our fee of $10.44 to arrive at a figure of $18.73. Next slide. Next slide. And next slide. When we do the math, what we find out, right, our regulations, the GAR, 4 GAR Articles 1 to 5, it described to us the method by which we arrive at these figures. The total estimated passenger service, or the total estimated passenger arrivals, is the number that we use to divide against what our anticipated costs are. Once we do the division, we're able to arrive at the figure that the director has identified to be the rate that would provide us the cost recovery to execute our operations at the new proposed budget. Next slide, please. And next slide. So this is for our cargo operations. And if you're following through the slide, I don't want to, well, let me go through it, right? So if you're following through the slide, what you notice here is the breakdown of what the actual charges are. For our airport operations, you are charged $5 for anything before you get to 100 pounds. Anything after 100 pounds, the 0.0012 rate is applied to each pound of cargo that is imported. When you come down to the Port Authority of Guam, you are allowed, your allowance is $4,000 and you're charged $5 for that. And for every pound thereafter, you are charged 0.0012. And in the next slide, please. Using the figures that I have been able to pull from actual annual reports prepared by both the Airport Authority of Guam and the Port Authority of Guam, we're able to arrive at the cost of indicated on the slide to effectively provide cargo clearance service at the air cargo area of operations. Next slide. And the same figure is provided for you as well for our maritime. The figure is derived again from taking the total amount of cargo and dividing it by our anticipated costs for operations in that location. Next slide. That figure represents the total difference between what our the total amount that is different from what our anticipated costs are. Next slide, please. And that figure represents what it is we need to make up. Slide. That amount, 0.0009, represents the amount that we are seeking to increase the rate by. And next slide. We are looking at increasing the rate from 0.0012 to 0.0021. Next slide, please. That's what happens when you look at and think about it all at once. So just for a laugh. Next slide, please. So one might wonder, right? Wow, that's a huge amount that you're charging me, a fraction of a cent. A fraction of a cent, right? We're not even at a cent yet. A can of Spam costs approximately $2.62, but each can of Spam weighs less than an actual pound. So if I was to use this as my gauge, you'd pay a cent more for a can of Spam. Would you be price sensitive? Would any of the senators present today be price sensitive to a 1 cent change in the price of Spam? I wouldn't. Would you not buy the can of Spam if it cost 1 cent more? Okay, all right. Yes, we will save that question for later. Next. I've actually done the calculations, right? And so if you were to take the volume of a can of Spam and filled a 40-foot container with it, you would have 11,786 cans of Spam in that 40-foot container, and you would pay, right, as an importer, based on what our current rate is going to be, $15.16. So the increase, again, right, is small when you consider that businesses occasionally, I mean, I want to say usually, but may apply a 30% markup to the goods that they bring in to recover costs for shipping, and then also other costs that they incur. Next slide. Did anybody want me to leave it there? Yes. I apologize for not making those available. Okay. And so again, I have the slide, the full-blown package in front of you for the $34.9 million. And then what I've done is I've gone through each of the initiatives and provided a slide to justify or to show you where the values come from. And next slide, please. This is our promotion initiative. Yeah. So when you look at that bottom line figure, to move when Director McDonald first came on board, he recognized that many of the officers that he had left were still there when he had retired from the agency. And he found it troubling that many of them were still customs officer ones. And so he had made the talk to the managers, and also made it one of the things that his intentions were to perform as the director was to promote those eligible officers to the next rank. And along the way, Chief has actually spoke about this on many occasions, that we need to develop graduated levels of customs officer rank progressions. And so maybe Chief can talk about that after. But the figure, that's where the figures are derived. The breakdown of the apportionment of costs to each of the service areas is also included there. Next slide, please. This is our vehicle modernization initiative. What I've indicated, and you're not able to see clearly there, is that those are 35 vehicles that are in our current inventory. Those vehicles are more than 10 years old. Our intent, many of those vehicles are more than 10 years old. Our intent is to replace all vehicles, right, that are over 5 years of age. And we start to find that our costs start to increase once a vehicle becomes older than 5 or 6 years. And our cost to maintain and repair that starts to place a burden on the agency. If we are to provide the service and there is a cost recovery mechanism, then our intent down the line or down the road is to have the users of our service pay for the cost that it takes to run the agency and perform our operations. In turn, if we are replacing vehicles every 5 years, our intent is to share that with the rest of the government of Guam. And we can share that with our other law enforcement officers as we replace our fleet. I think a 6- and 7-year-old vehicle might still be something that our folks would gladly, in our other law enforcement agencies, would gladly take hold of. In fact, I think many of them are already using the LESO program, and those vehicles are much older than what it is that we're proposing in this. And so, next slide, please. To establish a figure, we had determined that the vehicle that we would like to have replace our current fleet is a vehicle that provides us the capability to transport teams of officers to be able to perform work at multiple locations of rough terrain throughout the island, or even areas of the port that might require us to that cause us to have difficult access. And what we've come up with is, just as a representation, is a Chevy Tahoe. We're not brand specific in this, but the LE package that comes along with it, we're looking at a total projected cost of $52,000 for each vehicle, and then a total cost of $1.8 million for replacing all 35 vehicles. Next slide, please. Our intent is to ensure that our officers have the latest technology sitting in front of them, and in order for them to be more effective in performing their functions, they require up-to-date automated systems. There are systems that we have to gain access to, and our systems are too slow. The type of training that is also available these days are distance learning, and many of these require certain programs in order to access and to run effectively. Otherwise, you'd be sitting for an hour trying to get through a computer-based type training. And so we're looking at a projected cost of at least close to approximately $1,200 for each of our officers to be equipped with a brand new automated system so they can perform their function. And that cost is reflected there at that $388,000. Next slide, please. Our hazardous duty pay is an issue that has been brought up by our director, and this is another avenue that we're seeking to gain approval for, and that is to be able to pay across the board hazardous duty pay for all of our officers. The figure, the top figure that you see there is our 2017 budget, and in that is where I pulled the $855,000 figure. Our 10% of our hazardous duty pay is 10%, and the projected figure for that is that amount right there, $855,000. Next slide, please. Again, here is the proposed budget. And next slide. The rate changes are indicated in this slide. And so I wanted to highlight the change in rate from $8.29 to $10.44 with a new rate of $18.73 to charge each passenger that's coming through, at a rate of 18.73. When we consider price demand elasticity, we do not see that airline passengers would be price sensitive to a $20 markup or change, administrative change or fee in their airline ticket. The change in the rate for cargo is going to change from 0.0012, increase by 0.0009, and will end up at 0.0021. Next slide, please. The rate change that we are proposing, we are seeking to implement this in 2 phases. And our first phase of implementation would take place in 2018, and our next rate change will happen again in 2020. There are some initiatives. There is an administrative logistics training support package that we have embedded in the budget proposal, along with what we have for 2020 as well. In them, you will see the different initiatives. One of the initiatives that you see up here is the evidence, logistics, equipment, and supply tracking modernization initiative. Our intent is to be able to effectively track all seized articles, all equipment, firearms, and be able to use current day technology to be able to do so, like radio frequency identifier tags, and what other barcodes to be assigned to certain things. And rather than having to write the entire nomenclature down, we're probably just scanning barcodes and performing inventories of that fashion. One of the other initiatives that we're looking at up there is the badging initiative. Many times or not many times, let me step back from that statement. In Honolulu, I had had an opportunity to attend training with the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, at the time U.S. Customs, and they are the ones in full control of the entry of people into the customs inspection area. They are the ones that control the badging. Here on Guam, because we do not have the capacity at this time, Guam Customs does not control the badging. TSA handles it, and the airport police handle it up at the airport, and the Port Authority of Guam handle it down at the commercial port. But the control of the border belongs to the Customs and Quarantine Agency. And if we are to fulfill our responsibility and our mandates, then we need to improve our capacity. And that initiative is one of those things that we've identified would bring us on par with the Tier 1 level countries in the region. Next slide, please. When we look at the service charge increases, we intend to be, at the end of 2020, having a final passenger service charge less than $25 and increasing to $24.53. And the cargo rate changing in 2020 to 0.0027. So just to highlight what those changes would be, in 2018 we would be at 1873 and increasing to 21, sorry, let me make sure I got that right. I'm sorry, yes, to 24.53, from 1873 to 2453, and from 0.0021 to 0.0027. We're looking to increase it, right. So we have a scheduled an increase in 2018, and then a scheduled increase again. We need to put this information out there so that our business, so our stakeholders who are going to be affected by this would have the capacity to plan for it and project or forecast what their costs are going to be as well. Slide, please. This is just in case anybody had questions on how our service charge. Madam Chair, that concludes my brief on the proposed service charge.
Thank you, Colonel Tyrone. I'd like to, at this time, open it up for any questions. Senator Ada, do you have any questions? And I also like to acknowledge Speaker Cruz for being present. Thank you, Speaker, and Senator Esteves. Thank you.
Well, first of all, that was a good presentation. I just have, insofar as you talked about the ideal number and whatnot of personnel to be able to do your work out there, but do you still have the problem of receiving advance manifests so that you are able to review them before the cargo, especially down at the port, review them and kind of have your game plan set up as to which containers need to be pulled and whatnot? Do you still have that problem?
We still have challenges in receiving the advance manifests, but we're working to effectively improve the efficiencies because there are other ways of getting the manifests. But I think one of the ways that we need to improve on that is to ensure that it's either done through legislation or we all agree as stakeholders that you would only improve getting your goods faster if you provide us with a manifest that we can readily screen much more quickly, because when you present the manifest at the window on the day when the vessel comes in and you're attempting to clear it, imagine there's have the X-ray teams who actually get stuff emailed to them, but it's always like a reminder, hey, can you send us the information? But I think that before we get too far, we've got to make sure that we have the platforms to be able to receive it and analyze the data. Yeah. But yes,
so I noticed that initiatives such as that, for example, going from paper-based to basically computerizing a lot of that data, I noticed that was noticeably missing from the presentation. We talked about modernization of vehicles, promotion efforts, and all that.
Yeah, Senator, if I might, we have a bunch of initiatives that are taking place simultaneously. So this is just the financial package of what we're approaching it from. However, we have statutes that are being developed, and in fact, it's already been packaged and it's in legislative form. Our team is looking it over, and we're just making sure that that's exactly what it is that we need, especially if we're going to change the current statute that covers manifests. And so with that is the indication or is the insertion of the requirements for it to be in a certain format, electronic being the preferred, and then also establishing timelines of when these manifests are due and to who it needs to be given. And when you fail to produce that, penalties will be assigned. Simultaneous to that taking place, there are other statutes that also need to come at the same time. And when we talk about them, at least in our agency, we talk about them as exigent statutory requirements. And they include bonds, manifests, value, and fines and penalties. And so in order for us to assess penalties and fines or even any type of forfeitures, we would require value. And so the statute that that is already packaged again, we've just not moved to legislative form to present to our committee chair, but we have the language. We're looking it over, and all those need to come together simultaneously when we implement when we implement the change. I hope that answers your question. Yes. Okay.
Thank you, Senator Etta. Senator Uggan?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you very much, Colonel Tyron, for the presentation, Chief, and to all of your officers who are here. Thank you. I appreciate the overall presentation, because when you're talking about promotion of personnel, certainly that's been a long time in coming. When you're talking about immediately recruiting approximately 29 new customs officers, that certainly is needed within customs and quarantine, especially when you're looking at your personnel dwindling down from 232 in 1998 to 109 officers, uniform officers at this point in time. So certainly the justification for looking forward in terms of promotions and taking care of vehicle changeovers and whatnot. My question is, looking at your customs user fees, and how much does it actually generate on an annual basis?
Okay, so I don't have that number, but pretty much when you look at the passenger inspection fee, it covers the airport operations. And then you have another fee for the maritime and air freight. We have to make adjustments in one area, like in order to offset some shortfalls.
No, but I'm not asking about any anticipated shortfalls. We'll get to that part of the discussion, because I'm sure the speaker is very much aware of that. So even if you take the 1.5 million visitors, you multiply the $8.29, which is the customs user fee today, it's approximately $12+ million.
Correct, sir.
But I was taking a look at some of your numbers. Your operational expenses presently in fiscal year 18, I believe, was at 14.9. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
That's correct.
So right now, I need you, Mr. Director and Chief, to make sure that the chairperson understands that the general fund, yes, is supplementing some of the requirements of customs and quarantine at this point in time. Because the initial intent when the fees were adjusted from 626, I believe, up to 829, which is the present rate, was to ensure semi-autonomy in terms of your funding mechanism for customs and quarantine. Unfortunately, that figure did not meet that requirement. Even shortly after the 8.29 customs user fee was adjusted, Madam Chair, there was still an additional requirement, a little bit in excess of about $1 million from the general fund. Now that has grown somewhat even more, because you take the 14.9, you minus the 12.4, then obviously the general fund continues to provide direct support to customs and quarantine. So I think with all these initiatives, they're really wonderful, but I think we need to get to the basics. How can we make sure that, in fact, any fees that are being generated are cost recovery? What is that figure? And then adjust it upward so that you can be able to accommodate the recruitment of the 29 additional customs officers. You know, in terms of looking at that and trying to approach the stakeholders, because the proposal you have here is going from 829 to, what was your final figure? 2453 in 2020.
Right.
And 2020 is 2 years out. So just understanding the process also, have you gone through the administrative adjudication process for the fee adjustments? Okay. So is the anticipation to take that route, or is the anticipation to go directly through the chair?
Could I answer that? So, Senator, the regulations actually tell us how we're supposed to proceed. We are supposed to get our budget approved by the legislature. Once it's approved by the legislature, we approach our stakeholders at the airport and both the cargo operations and present to them the proposed budget that we expect to put forth. And along with that budget comes now the new service charge rate if we intend to change the rate. So we got to get our budget approved
but
first.
Actually, I don't anticipate the legislature approving your budget without the fee adjustment.
I had wondered why it was written into law like that too as well, Senator. It didn't make sense.
If you recall the last process, if I may, Madam Chair, the last process was, it was adjudicated, then that particular proposal came before my committee, we had our hearing, We were able to discuss some of the issues, and then Customs was able to work with the airport officials so that, in fact, you notified the stakeholders. They were given ample time. As a matter of fact, there was an additional 3-month, 90-day extension in terms of the implementation date because of the process. So in this case, that's why I was asking if the adjudication process had actually been started so that you go out with your public hearing requirements, and then that would be inclusive of your stakeholders, and then obviously continue to press forward. The challenge I see is, and it'll be interesting to see how the stakeholders respond, because if you're looking at going from $8.29 to $24, $8.29 per passenger today, 2018, by 2020 to go to $24.53, that's a significant jump. And it appears as if, in fact, you want to resolve all your financial requirements right up front. And I'm hoping that the agency would look at phasing the process in terms of the implementation of the fees, so that you recover your costs, you address your new recruits, you address some of the other requirements, immediate requirements of customs and quarantine, and then look at an additional adjustment down the road, a few years down the road, so that in fact you started addressing your initiatives. And only because the cost on Guam has been increasing significantly, and this idea about paying 1 cent more for a can of Spam, I don't anticipate that that's going to be the minimal cost as a result of any adjustments in the customs user fees. And first of all, I would not equate increasing a can of Spam by 1 cent versus asking the question, who would not agree to that? I think we need to get back to the focus of our mission. And your mission is to protect our borders. Our people will pay what is necessary if, in fact, they know that our borders are going to be reinforced, and that the safety of this community and the drug interdiction process increases significantly, so that we can stop these drugs from coming in. We really got to figure that equation out. And if this is part of the equation, then we need to move forward, make sure that we go through that adjudication process and continue to address that. Now, quick question in regards to personnel, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask, because they have 109 individuals right now, uniform personnel.
Before you go, can I ask you a question, Senator?
We ask the questions on this end, Mr. Tyron. So let me just say, you have 109.
So I can't ask my question, is what you're saying.
Mr. Tyron, we are in a roundtable discussion. If you would like to ask a question, you can pose it to any member of this body, but not specifically to a particular individual.
I got it.
But you have 109. My question is, are any of your 109 customs officers eligible and interested in retiring over the course of the next year? Mr. Director or Chief?
Yes, we currently have, I believe it's between 3 to 4 officers who are looking at retiring, and already we have 2 who have submitted their intent to retire before the fiscal year is up.
So that even creates an even more urgent situation where, in fact, your fees have to be addressed in an expeditious manner, whether it's through the adjudication process or certainly addressing it through the chairperson. The other question that I have is, and it really comes down to numbers again, Madam Chair, $14.9 million, and please correct me if in fact that number is not correct, but based on the slides, $14.9 million is your present requirement for operations inclusive of all of your personnel. Your $8.29 generates about $12 or $13 million. So we are literally talking about general fund subsidizing customs and quarantine operations almost by, if not slightly more than $2 million. So that's a first and foremost issue that certainly I think the Chair of Appropriation would like to have addressed as there's any consideration for increasing fees. Additionally, the initiatives are right on point. Colonel Taryn, your initiatives are right on point in terms of upgrading your vehicles, making sure that you have promotions, you recruit additional personnel. They're initiatives that certainly over the course of the next few years has to be implemented or should be implemented. One of the other components that was assured, or information that was provided to the legislature when the fees were adjusted from 626 to 829 was that the carousel was going to be upgraded or repaired. Was that, and that never materialized. So that's now not part of the initiative process. So now is that the responsibility of the airport, or how are you viewing that?
Well, one of the things that happened during the time when we requested when we were going through the administrative adjudication process was when we were increasing our fees, one of the anticipated costs that wasn't a cost as of yet was the 40% increase to law enforcement. So when the 40% increase had dropped, of course, we're limited with the amount of funds that we have. So in looking at our budget, you're going to have to try and reallocate funding from different sources. So in the end, our funding source had to be moved around in order to make sure that we made payments for the rest of the 40%. And so if you take a look at the initiatives that we were trying to accomplish, do you pay salaries, or do you build or redesign of an area? And of course, the answer is salaries need to get paid. So one of the things that we need to do is we still need to upgrade our carousel area, our inspection booths. Many of our travelers arrive daily and they see in the customs area how dismal and dark it is. And I'm pretty sure that when we have enough funding, we can appropriately attack the issue of new counters and carousels. However, the carousels are that portion of the airport is actually for the airport to take care of. Our area is as soon as you hit the ceramic tiles and the start of the primary counters all the way to the exit.
Okay, so our understanding now is that the carousel is not going to be the responsibility of Customs and Quarantine. It would be the responsibility of the airport, because that was the information that was shared with us back in 2013 when the fees were adjusted. So that's what I wanted clarification. But let me just close with this, Madam Chair. Certainly, we've already heard about the numbers, the requirement, some of the initiatives. I just want to say this much. A few times that my wife and I have had an opportunity to be able to traverse the airport, the customs officers have done a fantastic job. So I just want to extend my personal appreciation and acknowledgement of all the efforts that they're carrying out. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Uggan. Speaker, did you?
Thank you very much. The reason I was shaking my head was that I didn't really want to hear about vehicles or promotions. What I wanted to hear about today was your efforts to stop the drugs at the border. And for the last 5 years, since we had the disagreement about what the rates should be increased to, when I wanted it to go to 15 and you guys stopped at 11, and every year since then, and you've come in and you've wanted more money, and you've looked at me like I'm the reason for which drugs are coming into the island because we're not providing you with any additional money. Customs and Quarantine was supposed to be self-sufficient, and it was supposed to generate it from its fees. And that's why I wanted it to be 15 5 years ago. And that's why I am fully supportive of taking it to 18 today. I told you when I met with you 3 weeks ago, I'd be willing to go to 20. Because this seems to be a chicken and the egg issue of which comes first, my approving your budget at, again, 14 million, because all you're going to be able to collect is 12 million plus because you're stuck at $8 or $9, whatever that fee is. Or do we approve a new fee, and then you can come in and say, with this new additional income, we want to hire all these additional people. I don't see how you're going to be able to pick them up within a year. We've budgeted for the other public safety agencies to pick up 40 people a year, and one took 3 years and got 16. So it's just trying to get your budget up. And I understand not wanting to increase taxes. I thought that the move was, well, the passengers or the tourists coming in can be stuck with the cost. If we're going to be able to have them absorb the cost and protect our community by stopping the drugs at the border, I'm all for it. So what do we need to do? When you talk about you have this legislation that is exigent, and that was your words, that is still sitting with you that hasn't gone to either this current chair or the previous current chair, I don't know what your definition of exigent is anymore. That should have come in a long time ago. I mean, you never explained to us that was a major problem. Please.
We actually made that comment. Chief Harris actually talked about it the last time we were in here. It was our last public hearing, and he was actually talking about the OCO conference and some of the things that were. But again, your point is understood. We need to move quicker if it is truly exigent, and put it on the chairman's desk.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Something, because really seriously. Maybe I'm just too sensitive, but every time you've come in for a hearing and there's been discussions about not having sufficient number of people at the port or not having sufficient number at the airport, and the fact that somehow, and we're not covering the post offices, and we're not covering the FedEx and all the other delivery services of the boxes that are coming in, and everybody kind of looks at the appropriations chair like, well, why aren't you giving them more money? And you were supposed to be generating your own money, and it's been 5 years since we approved the $11 or $8.90, $8.39. This should have happened. Now you're talking about 1 in 18 and 1 in 20. We should have been having annual discussions about increases. It shouldn't be every 5 years or me calling you and screaming about the fact that I want to see an increase for it to be increased. We've got to move a little faster, and whatever it takes, if we need to do direct legislation, just increase it to 18 or 20 straight up tell us, and let's get it done, because I don't see how between now and September, I'm going to be able to approve a budget for $34 million for you when I know you only are going to raise 12 or 13. There has to be a proposed, or the way that GAR should be read is that for the upcoming year, you're intending to be able to do the $34 million worth of work. It should be approved, the new increase should be approved before the budget is submitted, and we have this done. It's May next weekend. And I don't know when we're going to be able to increase this, but I don't see being able to approve anything over the 14 million that we gave last time, and I'm still trying to figure out, I thought everybody kept saying that we were not providing any general fund revenue to assist you. Approving your budget unless we can get this new fee adopted and passed. Because really, seriously, this drug situation has gotten completely out of hand. And I don't care how many mandanas we have, as well as they're working, they are being prescriptive. We need to be preventative at the border and get them, stop it before it gets in. Because 18 pounds of cocaine or meth completely freaks me out. How that gets through anything is beyond me. So whatever it takes, Madam Chair, I've had them in my office. I hope you don't take offense to my having them in, but I needed to get it off my chest that I needed to get them to start moving, because 5 years is too long to wait for an increase, so we can increase their budget so they stop giving me the look out of the corner of their eye like, give us more money, you cheap. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Vice Speaker, do you have any questions?
Hi, thanks for your testimony. I too am here because I thought we were going to talk about drugs specifically, what the issues are, why are they. I appreciate that you described it as a gap, and it's very obvious there's a gap someplace, right? And everyone I talk to points to the borders, and I'm glad that you're admitting that. So I guess I just want to know, I mean, so we hear your initiatives, and it's just kind of a, I don't know, like a jump for me to tie the initiatives with the marijuana. I mean, not the marijuana, the drugs at the borders. I liked the fact when you pointed that your statistics show that the number of personnel is directly related to the number of seizures. But I guess I just wanted to know more, what kind of analysis are you doing as to where is the best place to catch these drugs? For example, your proposal for the port, you said, is a mobile X-ray or an advanced container X-ray system that you're going to look in the containers while they're already on the tractors going out of the port, right? Is that the best place to do that? I mean, this is your field, not mine, but you know, rumors. I've heard rumors that by that time we're kind of late. Is that true in your experience, or what? I guess I want to know, what kind of statistics or data do you have that could help us understand where the gaps really are, more specifically? I mean, because if we invest a lot of money in X-ray equipment that's going to, you know, X-ray them as they're going out of the port, and that's not early enough, then can we readjust that and get it before they're offloaded from the ships or some other way? That's what I want to know.
Okay, so
same thing with the air.
I'm gonna, Senator, I will move into that discussion point, but before I get to that point, I gotta paint the picture for you. Methamphetamine can be purchased on the West Coast for anywhere, and just watching Drugs Inc. last night, one of them had reported that you could purchase a pound of methamphetamine for $1,500. For the longest time, I've been using reports that I've been seeing from out of the DEA that the Sinaloa cartel is responsible for, they are assumed to be responsible for pushing the methamphetamine up into the West Coast. And so if you do some math, just some of my previous assessments were that if you could buy a pound of ice for $3,000 and you sold or broke that down into 454 grams, you would end up with close to $100,000 in profit. And if you were to turn around and purchase, again, the amount, or to just purchase the entire amount of a pound of meth at $3,000, you would be able to purchase 49 pounds of methamphetamine. And all you had to do was put it in 49 different packages and send it through the mail and pray for one of them to make it through and still make your $100,000 with 1 pound. It's approximately, the problem is truly grown in magnitude, and some of our recent information even tells us that that is the case. About a year ago, the price that we were being told was that methamphetamine was anywhere from $600 to $300. And today, or just as recent as last week, in some of our discussions with our personnel, it's $250 to $300, depending on how close you are to the source. And so the approach to the problem is one of enforcement and one of rectifying the demand. There will continuously be a drug problem on Guam so long as there is a demand for it. And especially if the demand is coming twofold, one of entrepreneurship and the other of addiction. And so the fix to the problem is definitely, yes, beef up your law enforcement folks up at the border. So the problem is that the primary mode of smuggling at this point that we are aware of is through the post office. Last month, we were told that 10 pounds had come through, right? Come through the post office. Not in one occasion, but through multiple shipments. And that's alarming. The problem with the post office is we are not positioned at the post office. The jurisdiction and authority of the post office belongs to the federal government. And the federal government has increased the number of people that they're placing to assist us with the problem. And instead of having just one postal inspector, we now have two. And I think they're still looking to send another, because one of them had PCS'd or had a change of station, and they're looking to replace that person. But you cannot, there are certain regulations or even requirements that need to be fulfilled at the post office, and we can't have a person at the post office at our leisure. And so that's one of the gaps. When you talk about how our officers are performing in the field, we need to move to a performance-based evaluation system, right? And truly have some clear performance indicators that we need to be able to identify and hold them accountable to. But we're not at that point yet. We cannot move, and maybe that's probably an extreme way to use the term or to explain it, that we cannot move unless we have personnel, but we cannot expand into the areas of training and enhancement type training without personnel. And so we need the personnel to be able to do the job. I think I'm going off track here, but your question is, right, your question is that how are the drugs coming in, right?
How are the drugs coming in, and how exactly are you tying your initiatives to that answer, to exactly
right.
how
So,
they're coming? And
so
we know they're coming in through the port, through
yeah.
the airplanes, and through
right.
the postal service.
Yes.
But we're asking for new cars. You know what I mean?
Right.
And that's why I want to know where are the gaps that exist, and through this whole discussion, we haven't heard anything that gives us any assurance as to how the current gaps are going to be closed, you know, while we're still working on these initiatives. Is there?
Can I ask a clarification? For clarification, Senator. So you're concerned about vehicles?
No, I'm not concerned about them. I just want to know that we are addressing.
Yeah,
the gap.
Because we need to move around the island in order to do the job.
You're going to be hiring 100 more officers.
Right.
And then you want to be able to move them around
to
the different, and you're establishing different teams for your gap management, you call it, the tarmac, the stow area, exit, and inventory points. Yeah, so I understand that, but I guess I just wanted to know what was this based on? Did you are there findings anywhere, or are we kind of guessing, right, that you need to get the tarmac and these other areas separately, or do we know that there's a better point to put all our efforts into? That's all I want to know, is what is this based on? Is it just based on your experience, which I very much respect? That's why I said you are the ones who are doing this. So that's what I want to know. And with 100 more personnel, I would hope we have people everywhere that we can have them at all the relevant times. I don't know, right? Isn't that part of your plan? So I guess I am just a little confused. So yes, where do you find your gaps specifically? For example, the port. Let's just talk about the port, since Senator Addis started with the port. The port, is it on the way out? Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, so those gaps, I mean, you identify them for us, Senator. When people, why smuggle drugs in my baggage when all I have to do is ask one of my buddies who works on the ramp to take the item out? take the item out of the bag while I'm there because there's no customs officer monitoring this. And so because there's nobody monitoring it, right, why do I have to go to the line? I'll just call my contact okay, so my experience, yes. I've actually run operations where we found people because we performed this type of operation. I've been in charge of the Special Enforcement Division, and in the Special Enforcement Division, we utilize all of the advanced training that our officers receive, the K-9, their investigative techniques, and then also just their experience, right, in these areas. And when we have a higher concentration of people and we're able to move them, the smuggler has to guess where we're going to be. But currently, they don't even have to guess. They know, well, they're definitely not back here. So we have intelligence information, because you did ask, right? I mean, and you're spot on with that. What assessments did you guys perform? We have intelligence from our officers, and that's why we need officers, because we have officers assigned to the federal task forces. In the federal task forces, they are able to perform investigations and send intelligence back our way that tells us that people are smuggling stuff not through the line, but they're smuggling it through what we call internal conspirators. There are people who perform functions to remove articles out of bags and hand carry it straight out the back gate. Why go through the front when I could just full customs to the rear? Because we don't have enough personnel. At the commercial port, because we don't have the ability to place a team at checkpoint daily, then we also have that problem. We don't have full control of surveillance in the area because we don't have adequate personnel to do so. The Port Authority, through the director's relationship with them, has offered us to use their situation room and the cameras that they have. But it's of no use to us because we don't have personnel to man the cameras, and neither do we have personnel or vehicles to get in a vehicle and respond to the location where the threat might be at that point. So, yes, those are some of the examples that I can share with you.
Yes, thank you. That's exactly what I wanted to hear, and I'm wondering if you have a report like that ties, because, you know, we're going to convince the public, yes, we should all agree to this increase in fees, right? That it's going to go exactly, that we will at the end of, 1 year, 2 year, how long? Hopefully immediately, right? See a decrease in the drugs in Guam. I just want to tie it more closely to really the end result, right? By your strategy. Yes, thank you.
Some other avenues that I wanted to mention also is that we're seeing is, small boats coming in from neighboring islands, smuggling in drugs into Guam. Those are one of the gaps that we need to close in on because, we're getting information from our neighboring islands like CNMI that, hey, you guys need to have more eyes on these small boat owners that are bringing in drugs, through, the ocean. Another thing is that we're having problem with at the airport is internal smuggling, through the cavity. That's becoming very common now with us. A lot of people don't know about that, but, people coming in, human carriers coming in through the airport. It's unfunded based on the profiling of our officers. These individuals are taken to the Guam Memorial Hospital for a more intensive search, X-ray, and it costs a couple $1,000s. That's not funded in our, in our budget, so we have to reach out to our federal partners. Hey, how can we pay for this? Or we have to contact GMH, and poor GMH, it puts them more in the red. So those are the kind of challenges that we're facing right now. These guys are getting very creative. As you guys are aware, a couple months ago at the airport, a guy comes in a wheelchair, and guess what? Our dog just happens to be around there, and he sniffs 1 pound of meth on the cushion of this individual, that is sitting on a wheelchair. And then after that, we get information from DEA. Hey guys, you guys need to start checking the corpse, the casket that's coming in. So you see, we have to start being more creative now. We have to start thinking outside of the box. because these individuals now, they're doing everything to find ways to bring drugs into Guam, because the demand is, the supply and demand is so high here in Guam. So that's the very reason why we're down here. And, we want you guys to understand that, it's not just the regular bags, it's not just the regular cargo. These guys are being very creative, and we need to get smarter, and, we need to protect our people out there, because, as you see, like what the speaker was saying, everyone out there is hurting. When a pound of drugs passes through the borders, the domino effect it has in the community and the cost is astronomical. So, that's why we're down here, Senators. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Senator Maria, did you?
I have one quick question, ma'am.
Okay, sure, Senator.
Has any customs personnel been diverted to go up and pull security duties at DOC or, to cross level? Have any of the customs personnel been diverted?
Senator, no. As a matter of fact, yes.
Most of my questions have been answered already, but I guess specifically, I'm sure that the personnel and the increase in personnel also involves the canine units as well. So I guess my question would be, how many canine units do we have now currently, and what is the optimal units that we're looking forward to? It seems like the canine units is very vital too in detection, so if that's something that we can also improve on.
We have two canine units. We have the agriculture canine unit and our narcotic canine unit. Now, if you're talking about dog teams, we have 4 narcotic dog teams, and we have 6 agricultural canine units. Now, the optimal will be 18 per unit. That way they can run 6 dogs per shift. When we're looking at the amount of the volume of passengers we have coming in and cargo, we're looking at dog teams need a certain amount of rest when they go out. So they rest, the other team comes out and works. So they'll work together to tackle the workload during that shift.
So specifically, so each dog team, or each dog has one handler? Is that how it works?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so you can't have like one handler and 2 dogs, or?
It's not recommended, but the military does do that. They do. But we recommend that the dog bonds to a certain handler, so he'll probably work better with that one handler.
So optimal is 18 per unit? 18
Yes,
per,
ma'am.
okay.
Thank you for this opportunity, Madam Chair. Gentlemen, thank you for being here. I know we've been in numerous discussions over these issues, and I thank you for your efforts. I think really to put things into perspective, I think what we were presented today has been, I think, a dramatic change in, I think, the efficiency and the evaluation and the planning of this particular agency in moving forward so they can properly be funded. And I just want to highlight, since this is an informational briefing on some things that we have discussed that I could share with my colleagues and the public as well. So in current law, so we're all on the same page, the evaluation of the rate so that you can cost recover to provide services, how often is that supposed to be done? Annually, yes. And so what we've identified, I think, in our discussions is that has been historically difficult because of the lack of personnel. You have one, ASO available. The systems are out of date. You've been working with both the airport and GVB to try to be able to pull the data, but in terms of the accounting aspect, it's difficult to keep up to date with the value of that rate because you guys are all uniformed personnel with the exception of the director at this time, and you have other duties to perform. So what we're looking at today, aside from the gaps and the different avenues and strategies that infiltrators are using to penetrate the border, we have probably a 5-year difference since your rate has been reevaluated. My understanding of the GAR and the law right now is that when the legislature approves your budget, that merely is to authorize that amount to be spent, whether it's 16 million or 13 million, because it's actually not cash on hand. And you are not able to even begin negotiations with the airport and the carriers until you have that authorization from the legislature to even spend that amount of money that you're proposing to increase the fee to, correct? And that's what it currently is within the law. Now I just want to ask again, and please answer as candidly as possible. When you guys propose your budget, and you have been for the last couple of years, based on your operational needs, which kind of a misnomer because they're not necessarily operational needs, because you're actually recovering costs from what you already intend to spend, right? So it's a little different from other public safety agencies. Does the administration put a cap on your budget, and do they reduce that amount before approving it?
So the answer is yes. We get a budget ceiling based on projections, and if the projections don't show that we're tracking in line with passenger numbers coming in, then yes, we do have a ceiling.
Which is still a bit different, right? Because the rate, the adjustment is based on what that budget is. Again, kind of a unique situation with customs as opposed to other public safety agencies, which kind of puts you back into this predicament. Is that how I've been understanding it? And so, yes.
Yeah, that is correct, Senator. But the agency does have the opportunity at the end of every year to recover any additional costs that there might have been, and then also project operations for the following year and make the recommendation for a rate change. And so I think the two are actually different, right? That the ceiling is placed by BBMR so that we can be within what it is that we're collecting. But if we are able to propose a rate change and gain support from all the stakeholders, then I do not see them preventing us from increasing our budget based on what we could potentially collect. It goes differently. It was almost like what Senator Uggan was explaining earlier. I had a question for him, but I'm going to ask him later. Right, I'll ask him later. But what he was trying to explain is that because sometimes what happens is we go through the AAA process, we are able to get to the stakeholders, we change the fee. Then we start to collect the money. Then we show up here and say, and then BBMR is a little bit more supportive of us because then we have a tracking, right, showing that we have been collecting this amount, and if we are going to be able to collect the amount we just did, like as hypothetically in the previous 3 months, then they would be more amenable to saying, yes, customs, we'll give you the $34 million budget because it's obvious that you're able to collect it.
Yeah.
Right. So.
And I think it's kind of, again, and the speaker alluded to this, it's the chicken and the egg situation. And I think the way the current law reads, as I understand it, it's really to provide you with more autonomy because of kind of your unique situation with cost recovery as opposed to the proposed budget. Because whether it's a projection on the budget with BBMR and the legislature saying, well, we think you might get this amount this year, versus, well, we think we might get this amount of passengers, what stays true is how much does customs actually need? How much can they justify in terms of operational expenses? And then the proposed fee is a match to whatever gets to that number, gets them close to that number. So I think it's kind of, you can take it from many different angles, but the goal at the end of the day is that customs has that final number based on their operational needs. And I just wanted to highlight the issue of a budgetary cap, because if it's just a cap not based on merit or justification of operations, as opposed to just a flat like cap, okay, you need 10 million, but you can only use 9, that's already automatically going to put you in the red, regardless of whether it's an outside source paying for that amount. So I just want to highlight that. If you can please provide, again for the record, what is the rate the average user fee rate in the region. Maybe you can share that. Passenger fee, user fee.
Yes. In Japan, it's $45.
Korea, it's about 48, I believe.
Yes. And when you land in the U.S., it's $75.
How about the Philippines, Mr. Director?
Philippines, there's an arrival fee of about $40, and then when you depart, it's $50.
So we're looking in the region, I think based on the numbers that I've seen, it's about a $45 average fee. So looking at about a $20 to $23 increase is not necessarily, I don't think would be people, at least tourists or visitors would be overly price sensitive when majority of the 1.4 million make up that difference in terms of visitor tourist arrivals, correct? Is that correct?
Yes, and then when you go to Palau, it's about $100. They call it an environmental fee.
Okay, excellent. And I think I hit all my points, Madam Chair. Again, thank you for the opportunity. Gentlemen, keep up the good work. Thank you again.
Thank you, Senators. Just because we have another hearing at 3, I just want to close real quick. We've been discussing the rate increase since the beginning of the term, no? And so I want to commend you, Director and Chief, and the rest of your staff for developing a plan of this increase to go through the adjudication process. However, I think that we need to stay focused on the topic of we want to address the drugs that are coming in on our borders. That is the focus here, because what we see in this plan, anyone can misconstrue it to say, oh, this agency is trying to be fat. You know, they're trying to build their own kingdom. But the real issue is that there are drugs that are going unchecked into our borders. Drugs are getting washed up upon our shores. The street value of methamphetamine was once at $600 per gram. Now, Colonel Tyron, you stated it was $250 just by going through the DEA intelligence that is provided to you. And so we need to hone in on these issues and show the impacts to the people of Guam, how the passenger fee rate increases are going to help our community. That's what needs to be our focus. Because really we see it affecting our families. It's in almost everyone's home. I see a lot of my high school friends addicted to it, you know. And so what are we going to do? Are we going to turn a blind eye? And we cannot. You say that a lot of it is coming in through the Postal Service. Well, then you spoke a little bit more in detail, Colonel Tyron, that you're not even able to check everything at the port. So yes, perhaps we're accounting for the Postal Service because you have the support there with the federal agency, but at the port, you're short in manpower. So of course you're not going to see any cases, or you're not going to be able to account for the cases because you don't have the manpower to support your operation. And that is a big travesty, because what you're missing is the impact that it's going to destroy our community when these drugs go through our port authority, through our airport, and again through our postal service. So you don't have the data there because you don't have the manpower to collect the data, and you shared that also. And so we need to focus on that. Yes, there's a lot of things that your plan does address as far as your information management systems, your IT systems, and those are essential also. But you need to quantify it, to show that if we invest this much in our IT, this is how much we're going to save, right? So hopefully we can have another roundtable discussion to discuss those details and to hone in on the problem that drugs are going unaccounted for into our borders. We need to let the community aware. We cannot hide this problem anymore. We see it all over our streets. The Mandania Drug Task Force is busting a lot of people. So why aren't we stopping it at our borders? How is it still being manifested on our island? And it cannot be manufactured here, right? There's no evidence that these drugs are being manufactured here. It's coming through our borders. So we need to start paying more attention to the needs of customs and quarantine to protect our community. And so thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here. I look forward to seeing you again and further discussing the topic. And I'm very glad that the speaker is present and pushing you guys to increase the fee and do it now and do it soon. Okay, thank you very much. The time is now 2:56. This roundtable hearing is now adjourned. Thank you very much for coming.